I have been immensely proud to represent my country here, the most moral country in the world, the most moral country in the world. You listen, Palestinian representative, in this warped place. I hope one day you will also see the bias and perversion of morality here, and I pray that you will see the truth. The terrorist organization that this guy represents here and tyrannical regimes should be condemned, not protected, and that Israel should be praised. We are today the vanguard of civilization. We are the vanguard of civilization. But until then, Am Israel Chai.
Wake up. Wake up. How long do you have to remain in denial? Wake up. Stop finding excuses. When will the Israeli government be held accountable for its actions? When? When will the war criminals be sanctioned? And as my brother from Algeria, it is time to sanction.
Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Africa's geopolitics, economy, and changing landscape. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: African politics, economy, and increasing power. Let's continue now.
I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Mr. President, I thank USG, Mrs. Rosemary DiCarlo, and OCHA Director, Mrs. Lisa Doughton, for their briefing. I will start my statement by the same question of Mrs. Doughton. How long? Is it going to be yet another ineffective, vain, and hopeless meeting of the Security Council? Are we going to count and count the number of deaths in Gaza? The answer is simple. This is neither what the Council is designed for, nor what the international community expects from us. More importantly, this is not how the Council should address the Palestinians' plea, the Palestinians' quest for justice, the Palestinian right to exist. Our Council has the legal and moral primary responsibility to act, and to act firmly, to shoulder its mandate in preserving international peace and security. Mr. President, for 311 days, our Council has been constantly fooled and disregarded, while an entire population has been subjected to a collective punishment. Last Saturday, the world woke up to yet another horrific bloodshed after the Israeli occupying power targeted deliberately a school in a Daraj neighborhood in Gaza. It was the third school bombed in 2 days. It was a civilian structure, sheltering civilians by the testimony of the international community. Our Secretary General said it clearly. The school was sheltering hundreds of displaced Palestinian families. The Euromed Humanitarian Rights Monitor also stressed that the school was nothing but a dilapidated place that hundreds of families have taken refuge in. These testimonies of one of the survivors is harrowing. A father said that he has been given 18 kilogram of body parts, and he buried them as the body of his young son. Mr. President, this heinous massacre of Ad-Daraj and the previous ones wouldn't have been possible without the generous financial and military assistance freely provided to the Israeli aggressor. More than 100 innocent lives were sacrificed in Ad-Daraj, among them women and children, in addition to the nearly 40,000 Palestinian martyrs so far. Were these martyrs not human? With their dreams, with their hopes, as we all do? Is the Council's role limited to keeping a record of lost lives? Again, the answer is simple. Our Council must, and now, fulfill its responsibilities and honor its commitment. Its responsibility to tackle the root cause of the Palestinian question, which is the illegal occupation of the Palestinian land. Its responsibility to hold the occupying power accountable using all legal means, including sanctions. Yes, sanction mechanism. Third, its commitment to achieve a just and lasting peace in the Middle East and to prevent the dangerous escalation provoked by the Israeli occupying power. Mr. President, the Israeli occupying power continue to defy the very commitment of this Council, made in Resolution 2735, calling for the implementation of an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Immediate ceasefire in Gaza. This resolution is seriously jeopardized by the intensifying aggression of the Israeli occupying power against Gaza. Algeria warns against this continuing sabotage of effort made by the United States, Egypt, and Qatar to implement this resolution urgently and effectively. In this regard, Algeria expresses again its support for the mediation effort made by these three countries. There is no room for delaying or over-complicating negotiation by adding new conditionalities or new demand. Engaging in good faith in the initiative of President Biden is paramount to achieving the long-awaited ceasefire. Mr. President, for the sake of humanity's value, we must act now. Our inaction is costing life and jeopardizing the destiny of a whole people, the Palestinian people. I thank you.
I give the floor to the representative of the Observer State of Palestine.
Mr. President, as we gather here for the 10th month in a row to advance a ceasefire to save human lives, Israel continues taking human lives and every action possible to spread a wildfire across the Middle East. As we sit here on the 75th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions that were birthed in the ruins of entire cities, in the mass and indiscriminate killing of civilians, in the death chambers in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as a pledge that the light will emerge out of the darkest night and protect the dignity and humanity of all persons caught in armed conflict, Israel is tearing the conventions apart in Gaza along with every rule humanity has ever elaborated. As we meet here in New York, there are Israeli government and military officials, pundits, and analysts explaining seriously that they are entitled to carry out indiscriminate and disproportionate attacks against the Palestinian civilian population, to wage war against civilians. They explain that starvation is a legitimate weapon of war. They justify gang rape and torture against defenseless prisoners as a required deterrent. And this is not a theoretical exercise. This is what Israel is imposing against millions of Palestinians, no man, woman, or child spared. You demand Israel to stop killing civilians as a Security Council, but it targets them in their shelters and tents. You demand Israel to allow food and medicine in, but it ensures that famine and diseases spread. You demand Israel to treat Palestinian prisoners humanely, but it tortures them and allows the Israeli jailers to rape and abuse their Palestinian hostages. You call on it to stop its settlements, but it rapidly accelerates its colonization of Palestinian land. You urge Israel to uphold the historic status quo at the holy sites, but its ministers and settlers desecrate the Al-Haram al-Sharif each time more openly and provocatively. So let me state the obvious. Israel does not care about your condemnations. Let me repeat. Israel does not care about your condemnations. It dismisses your resolutions. It does not even listen to your debates. Their representative will be playing with his iPhone while you are talking. As countries, as a Security Council, you had a responsibility to act months ago to stop this impunity. As the genocide continues, you have a responsibility to react, to save human lives, and preserve the foundations for peace and security for all, not just for some. Israel is a rogue state with a rotten government due to the unbridled impunity it has enjoyed so far. I have no doubt that the tides will turn, and we will not be deterred in making sure no one can act as if Palestinians' lives are worthless. But Palestinians in Gaza cannot wait for the tide to turn. Their agony must stop now, must stop right now. They wonder if you see them. Do you ever think, what if you were born in Gaza? What if the prisoner raped was your son? What if the children starving to death were your own? What if that woman killed was your daughter or your wife? What if the disease was riddling the body of your mother, your grandmother? What if that family that was blown into pieces or burned to death was yours? Killed in cold blood after running in desperation and hunger for months to survive. Just consider for one moment the sheer agony and despair that our people have suffered all these long months of deprivation and devastation lashed upon them while the world watched and left them to suffer, starve, and die. Mr. President, while we acknowledge and welcome the international consensus that has long called for an immediate ceasefire, clearly Israel has retained a veto right over that prospect. This must be brought to an end. Israel cannot continue to defy the world and every rule of humankind. It is not a coincidence. Every time the world pushes for a ceasefire, Israel responds with a massacre, like the one in the school. It sends a message, each more gruesome than the one before, that it will not stop. But there is no right to commit genocide. Obviously, no right. And we warn all those contributing directly or indirectly to the emergence of such a right. There is nothing that can justify Israeli actions. Nothing. And don't anyone dare say this is about the hostages. It's not about the hostages. It became apparent long ago that this Israeli government could care less about them. The hostages know it. Their families know it. You know it in the Security Council. Israel is killing them, abandoning them, playing with their lives. Netanyahu has other priorities, self-serving ones, maniacal ones. He's a maniac. Something terrible is happening in Israel. Something that has made justifying genocide, famine, and gang rape mainstream ideology. Something horrific is happening. The memory of the Holocaust, instead of serving as an unbreachable barrier against the commission of atrocities has been instrumentalized to justify their commission. How is this possible? 10 months later, with the whole world opposed to it, because that opposition has yet to lead to serious consequences for Israel. This is a hard fact. You have to face it. If there are no consequences, they're not going to stop. They're not going to listen to you. To those who continue to arm Israel, to those who still have the audacity to call in Israel, quote unquote, to investigate its own crimes, as if the actions of its soldiers do not reflect the actual policies of its military and political leaders. To those who dare to try and deter international courts from ensuring accountability instead of deterring the perpetrators of atrocities. Wake up! Wake up! How long do you have to remain in denial? Wake up! Stop finding excuses. Stop imagining that you can reason with the Israeli government so it stops killing civilians by the thousands, imposing famine, torturing prisoners, colonizing and annexing our land. All while you appeal to them, call on them, demand them to stop. You have to tell them to stop, and you have the tools to make them stop. As a Security Council and as nations in your national capacity. You have to decide, what do you stand for and what do you stand against? This is not a time for justifications and equivocations. This is a time for clarity and resolve. This is time to shore up principles and morality. Do not abandon your duties. Do not abandon your duties as a Security Council. You have the tools to make what you decide a reality, and no one should be above the law if you choose to do that. If you have the political will to implement what you decide. Mr. President, when will the Israeli government be held accountable for its actions? When? When will the war criminals be sanctioned? And as my brother from Algeria, it is time to sanction. We reject a position whereby you would be against hostage-taking except when the hostages are Palestinians, and whereby you would sanction war criminals except when they are Israelis. We cannot come back here over and over again and pretend that everyone does not all know that Israel will not listen until it has no choice but to listen. You have to make them have no choice but to listen to you until there are consequences for its crimes. You cannot commit a crime and get away with it. There has to be consequences for those committing crimes, for those who want to defend the four Geneva Conventions and all the Convention's elements. When in Article 1 it says that you have to ensure in all times the compliance with the provisions of the conventions. And you see them getting away with murder, and you keep repeating the same thing. When are you going to enforce your decisions and international law? You need to impose sanctions on those criminals. You do that, they will stop continuing to commit these crimes and atrocities and genocide against the Palestinian people. We reject a position whereby you would be against hostage-taking, as I said, except when the hostages are Palestinians, and whereby you would sanction war criminals except when they are Israelis. We cannot come back here over and over again and pretend that everyone does not know that Israel will not listen until it has no choice but to listen until there are consequences for its crimes. Palestinians are exhausted, surrounded by death and endless horrors, and they know your words are your words are no match for the bombs and bullets taking away their lives and limbs. But words are not all this Council has. Words are not the only tool your countries have. Some have gone beyond words. They are too rare. This is a time to act, as a number of you have stated. And you will be judged not only for the eloquence of your speeches, but also, and more importantly, for the courage of your actions. Show some courage. Show some bravery. Take actions. Stop the criminals in getting away with murder. Mr. President, we don't want Israel to torture our prisoners a bit less. As some say, that torture them a bit less. We want to see them free. We don't want Israel to make its occupation a bit less brutal. We want to see it end. Our people deserve freedom. The International Court of Justice has been unequivocal in its determination that, and I quote, the sustained abuse by Israel of its positions as an occupying power through annexation and an assertion of permanent control over the occupied Palestinian territory and continued frustration of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination violates fundamental principles of international law and renders Israelis' presence in the occupied Palestinian territory unlawful. Their presence in the occupied Palestinian territory is unlawful. Therefore, the court said it has to end as quickly as possible. This illegal occupation and all the illegal, inhumane, racist and destructive policies that flow from it must end. The Palestinian people will not disappear, and they will not surrender. They will not relinquish their legitimate aspiration to live in freedom and dignity in their ancestral land. I urge the Security Council to act. I urge you to act. And in the coming days, we will go to the General Assembly to make sure that it upholds its charter responsibilities, to make sure that the determinations of the highest court in the world, the ICJ, is translated into political will and momentum, into concrete actions to be pursued by the UN and its member states to end this illegal action as soon as possible. To protect civilians' lives, to preserve and pursue peace and security. Dag Hammarskjöld once stated, and I quote, "It has been said that the United Nations was not created in order to bring us to heaven, but in order to save us from hell. End of quotation. History will remember that the Palestinians were left to endure hell. Now, the fire they have painfully endured for almost a year is spreading to devour everything around in our region. There is only one way to stop a man-made fire. It is not enough to tend to the flames. You need to stop the arsonist. Let me repeat what our people in Gaza is saying, and they have been saying that, and they cannot take it any longer. Enough is enough. You have to act to put an end to this cruel criminality and genocide against our people in Palestine, particularly in the Gaza Strip. Will you do that, all of you? You gave beautiful statements. You said, you showed unanimity in rejecting their criminal action. But that is good, not sufficient. Show the will and the resolve to act on that basis with the tools that you have, with the mandate given to you by the Charter, to come to the Palestinian people and serve them justice, to stop the criminals from continuing in what they are doing. Can we count on you? Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the observer states of Palestine for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm sure many of you were not aware or did not care to check, but today is Tisha B'Av, the saddest day on the Jewish calendar, our ancient day of mourning. We are fasting today for the many tragedies in Jewish history that occurred on this day, including the destruction of our first and second holy temples in Jerusalem. But let me be clear. Jerusalem will never fall again. Jerusalem, united Jerusalem, will never fall again. No matter how many times our enemies attempt to destroy us, no matter how many times the UN slanders us and distorts reality. We will stay in our homeland and we will prevail. Mr. President, Council members, in the early hours of October 17th, 2023, reports flooded from Hamas Ministry of Health of an Israeli airstrike on Al-Ahli Hospital. You probably remember it. Remember that day. These reports were then quickly, very quickly, parroted by UN officials, media outlets, and several governments. Not even 24 hours following these baseless claims, this Council convened to discuss what was exposed to be a terrorist propaganda operation. As you probably remember, it was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket which fell on the hospital parking lot, not an Israeli missile. Fast forward 10 months, and nothing has changed. In the early hours of August 10th, 2024, the Gaza Ministry of Health, which the OCHA representative referenced while failing to mention it is in fact Hamas, has concocted a new blood libel. Once again, UN officials and media outlets were quick to echo this campaign of lies. I simply cannot comprehend that the United Nations Security Council would hold an emergency session based on jihadist propaganda. Once again, the Council falls for terrorist narratives, amplifying them and neglecting its obligations to the truth. Some in this chamber distort reality because of political interest, and we all understand the political interest. So I will set the record straight for all of you. On Saturday, August 10th, Israel targeted not a school, not an innocent school. We targeted dangerous terrorists operating in a Hamas command and control center within El Taba'in school. As usual, Hamas cynically abuses civilian facilities which should be protected as their terror bases. This strike eliminated at least 31 Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists who carried out attacks from inside this compound. These vile terrorists included platoon commanders, mortar and rocket operatives, cell commanders, and intelligence operatives. We neutralized dozens of vicious terrorists who used this school for their evil goals and were in direct violation of international law. But do you hold Hamas accountable for the losses? No, of course not. And of course he shouldn't speak for Hamas because he doesn't represent them. How convenient. By the way, the building itself is still intact, which would be physically impossible if Hamas claims are to be believed. So I ask you, dear colleagues, did you learn nothing from Hamas's lies about Al-Ahli Hospital or from their lies about Al-Shifa Hospital, which they also used as their headquarters, and the lies about our daring hostage rescue, among many other instances? In which other context would the international community rush to propagate the lies of a terrorist organization attempting to malign a democratic state, as we take every possible measure to minimize collateral damage, while Hamas uses civilians as human shields, deliberately putting them in harm's way? Not only are Hamas lies echoed here, but you also ignore and enable their outrageous violations of international and humanitarian law. Prohibited use of civilian infrastructure by Hamas terrorists are numerous, are widespread. Everyone, I'm telling you, everyone can see them. Everyone except the UN, of course. Yet, the briefer today only touched upon these violations rather than investigating the twisted and immoral strategies of Hamas terrorists. But why would we be surprised if the UN has no data of itself? They have to rely on baby killers and rapers to supply them the data. Just 80 years ago, the Nazi Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, used the language of race science as his weapon against the Jewish people, poisoning the minds of the German people. Mr. President, Joseph Goebbels' ilk, the people who are ideologically his descendants, are alive and well, sadly. Only now it is Hamas using the language of humanitarian and international law and modern blood libels to vilify Israel. The Council convened today urgently to discuss Hamas's false claims. Shockingly, it seems that you have decided to dedicate your time to listen to the terrorist lies, while no real concern has been shown when Israeli children were murdered only recently by Hezbollah. Let me show you the differences. These, and you have the names and their positions, these are the terrorists eliminated in Gaza on Saturday. This is only part of them because we, as a reliable country, we check ourselves. We don't rush to conclusions. But this is only part of the terrorists who were eliminated on Saturday. Terrorists exploiting Al Taba'in school as a base for their murderous objectives. These are the people you call an emergency session for. While these are 11 of the 12 Israeli children murdered by the terrorists of Hezbollah. These children were playing a football game in Majd al-Shams when Hezbollah terrorists rained down death upon their sweet heads. So while these terrorists used a school as their terror base, these children will never see their school again. But for them, you couldn't find the time for an urgent session. They do not deserve an urgent session, huh, my Algerian colleague? Shame on you. What a disgrace. So ask yourself, why was the murder of 12 Israeli children in Majd al-Shams insufficient cause for a meeting, but the elimination of Palestinian terrorists operating out of a school is sufficient? But you know what? The most unbelievable thing is your inaction to condemn and stop the biggest danger and threat to the entire region, Iran. Right now, as we speak here now, millions of Israelis are preparing for a direct Iranian attack, just as they did in April. Iran's aggression threatens the entire region with war, a regional war. Yet you are here wasting time on falsehoods spread by the words of terrorists. This fact that we are holding an emergency session because Hamas uses civilians as human shields rather than discussing the real global threat perfectly represents the distorted agenda within the UN, a significant detachment between the UN's supposed agenda and the global reality. Colleagues, as this may be the last time for me to address you as Israel's ambassador, though who knows, perhaps another session will be called because of more terrorist propaganda, I would like to leave you with this. I have been immensely proud to represent my country here, the most moral country in the world, the most moral country in the world. You listen, Palestinian representative, in this warped place. I hope one day you will also see the bias and perversion of morality here, and I pray that you will see the truth. The terrorist organization that this guy represents here and tyrannical regimes should be condemned, not protected, and that Israel should be praised. We are today the vanguard of civilization. We are the vanguard of civilization. But until then, Am Israel Chai. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Israel for their statement. The representative of Algeria has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President.
Très brièvement,
Very briefly,
je voudrais témoigner
I
ici
wanted to testify
que
here
les 16 000
that the
enfants
16,000 children
tués
who have been killed
depuis le 7 octobre
since
dernier
the 7th of October
ne se sont pas suicidés.
didn't kill themselves.
Je voudrais témoigner ici
I would like to
que
testify
les
here
plus de 10 000
that the
femmes
more than 10,000 women
massacrées
massacred
ne se sont pas suicidées.
didn't massacre themselves. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their further statement.
Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: African politics, economy, and increasing power. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.
Tell us what you think in the comment section. Like and share the video, and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our African videos. It's the best way to support us.